The Enchanted Forest, Alexander's Quest. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there was a dense and enchanted forest. The forest was so thick and overgrown that it was impossible to navigate without getting lost. Many people had attempted to explore the forest, but none had returned, for the forest was home to many mysterious creatures and enchantments. One day, a young prince named Alexander decided to explore the forest. He was a brave and adventurous soul, and he was determined to uncover the secrets of the enchanted forest. Alexander rode his horse into the forest, and soon found himself surrounded by towering trees and dense foliage. As he rode deeper into the forest, Alexander began to hear strange whispers and murmurs. He looked around, but could not see anyone or anything that could be making the noises. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his leg, and he looked down to see that he had been bitten by a poisonous snake. Alexander's vision began to blur, and he realized that he was in grave danger. He clutched at his horse's mane, but soon fell off and collapsed onto the ground. The last thing he remembered was the sound of fluttering wings, before everything went dark. When Alexander awoke, he found himself in a beautiful glade in the heart of the enchanted forest. He looked around, but could not see anyone or anything that could have brought him here. Suddenly, he heard a voice, and turned to see a beautiful woman standing before him. The woman introduced herself as the Faerie Queen, and she explained that she had found Alexander unconscious in the forest and had brought him here to heal him. She told him that he had been bitten by a poisonous snake, but that she had used her magic to neutralize the venom and save his life. Alexander was amazed and grateful, and he thanked the Faerie Queen for her kindness. She smiled at him and said that she had a task for him in return. She explained that an evil sorcerer had taken over her kingdom, and that she needed someone brave and clever to help her defeat him. Alexander was hesitant at first, but the Faerie Queen promised to reward him generously if he succeeded. She gave him a map of the kingdom and warned him of the dangers that lay ahead. Alexander promised to do his best and set off on his journey. Alexander rode through the enchanted forest, following the map that the Faerie Queen had given him. He encountered many strange and dangerous creatures along the way, but he was determined to reach the sorcerer's castle and defeat him. When he finally arrived at the castle, he found it to be a dark and foreboding place. The walls were high and thick, and the gates were guarded by fierce beasts. Alexander knew that he would have to use all his cunning and skill to get past the guards and into the castle. He crept up to the gates and used his bow and arrows to take out the guards. He then snuck into the castle, avoiding the traps and pitfalls that the sorcerer had set up. Finally, he reached the sorcerer's throne room, where the sorcerer himself was waiting. The sorcerer was a fearsome sight, with eyes as red as fire and a voice that echoed through the room. He laughed when he saw Alexander, and told him that he was no match for his powers. Alexander drew his sword, and prepared to fight. The battle between Alexander and the sorcerer was fierce and intense. The sorcerer used his magic to hurl fireballs and lightning bolts at Alexander, while Alexander used his sword and shield to deflect the attacks. It seemed that the sorcerer had the upper hand, and Alexander was starting to feel the strain of the fight. But then he remembered the words of the Faerie Queen, who had told him that he had a secret weapon. Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, glittering object. It was a diamond that the Faerie Queen had given him, and she had told him that it had the power to break any enchantment. Alexander held the diamond aloft and shouted the words that the Faerie Queen had taught him. Suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding light, and the sorcerer let out a scream. When the light faded, Alexander saw that the sorcerer had been transformed into a toad. Alexander felt a rush of triumph and relief, and he knew that he had saved the Faerie Queen's kingdom. He went back to the glade where he had first met the Faerie Queen, and she greeted him with a smile. She thanked him for his bravery and skill, and rewarded him with a chest full of gold and jewels. Alexander rode out of the enchanted forest, with his head held high and his heart full of pride. He knew that he had accomplished something great, and that he would be remembered as a hero for generations to come. And he knew that he would never forget the magical land of the enchanted forest, and the amazing adventure that he had experienced there.